Woods Houghton with Eddy County Extension Office again, and we're here at our office, 1304 West Stevens in Carlsbad, and it's actually kind of more of a home than it is an office for me because I spend more time here, it seems like. But we're going to talk a little bit today. It's a beautiful spring day. Everybody's calling and saying, when do I prune my roses? It was freezing just 3 weeks ago, and now it's nice and 95 degrees. But we're going to go through and talk about how to prune roses, and we're going to use the demonstration roses here at the office to do that. So if you'll follow me, we'll go through some of the equipment and some of the other things that you need to know to prune roses. Walk over here to the roses. I'm going to lay down my equipment that I don't need over here first. But one of the things that we need to talk about is sanitation. And sanitation is probably the most important thing you can do when you're doing your pruning, and whether you're pruning a tree or a rose bush or even your house plants inside. And I always like you wouldn't want a surgeon working on you with unsterile tools. So we're going to take a bucket, and you can use Clorox. I'm using another product that we use for horticultural supplies, but you can use Clorox just as easily. So. You don't have to be exact on this. You want about 1 part Clorox to do about 10 parts water, and you don't have to be real exact. I just kind of guess at it, do what we call the glug method, but and I've been doing it enough but if you want to measure it, you want to put 1 part of Clorox to 9 parts of water. So I'm just going to leave that key there so it's not in our way. And then we want to talk about, there's some good resources, so that I'm going to throw my pruning shears in here. Set this here. We've got 2 different pruning shears here. One's this is an anvil type. I don't like anvil types very often, but it comes down and clips on that anvil. It's usually the ones that you can buy a little bit cheaper. This one is a pass-through, and it goes all the way by like scissors, and you just put, and it doesn't matter if they're rusty. Of course, we'd like to have them cleaned up. And this is a big pair of loppers, and we're going to just put that there and let those soak for a few minutes. And then we have online resources. This one's called Growing Roses. The only people that publish more material than Extension Service is the IRS. And we're a lot more friendlier than they are. So, and this goes through the whole process of what you need to know about how to plant a rose, how to keep them through the winter. And the hard part about Eddy County is we are right here in the transition zone. We're not in the lower Sonoran Desert, and we're not in the upper Sonoran Desert. We're in that zone where we get the worst weather of both. So it's a little bit difficult. And trying to decide when to prune roses is always hard, because sometimes they don't go dormant, and sometimes they go dormant. So I like to prune them. Really, we should have pruned about 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, but 3 weeks ago it was minus 10 degrees here. And I wasn't going to go outside and prune my roses at minus 10 degrees. I don't know about you all, but that was just too cold. So I just now getting around to pruning my roses at home and here at the office. And we start looking here at pruning the roses. One of the things we want to make sure is you prune at a 45-degree angle when you do that cut. And the reason is, when you water and different things, you don't want that water sitting on top of that stem causing it to rot. So that way the water runs off. I grew up in the mountains where we cut all of our fence posts at an angle so that the water wouldn't sit on top of fence posts. Down here, I don't know if that's really, especially this year, if we get much moisture. Then you want to look at where the buds are on the stem, and we'll do this over here on this rose bush here in a minute. But you want to cut just a little bit, about a 1/4 inch above that bud. If the bud's down here, cutting way up here, that whole stem is going to die all the way back, and you got that dead material to attract insects and things that you don't want. If you got about that right amount, then that bud will go ahead and grow out. And if you're here real close, that bud could die, and then you'd go down the next bud, so you'll lose another 5 or 6 inches the same way. You know, and a cane is pruned, you know, on a lateral branch, and you really can't prune rose bushes too wrong. You know, my son, I was trying to teach him how to do this last year, and he says, what if I do wrong? I said, you'll have a dead stick sticking up there, and you just cut that dead stick part off. But the question is, how severe do I prune roses? And everybody wants to know, do I prune them really hard, or do I not hardly prune them back at all? And that depends on what you want. If you want large, beautiful roses, but not very many of them, you don't want to prune it back very hard. And that's kind of the way I've pruned these other ones that are pretty tall. And you look down here, we got some pretty tall rose bushes. They need to be pruned back this year, but you see how tall they are. Now this one, we wanted lots of roses, and not very big ones, but a lot of small ones. And I did this just to demonstrate that you can do that with a rose bush. And then we have a heritage rose down here that came from the original Eddy house, and it's not a very nice rose because it only blooms one time a year. You know, the tea roses, the hybrids now are so much nicer because they bloom all year round, and compared to the old heritage type roses. And one of the things that I always tell people, though, there's thousands of varieties of roses, and you'll see one rose that will turn yellow, and the next rose will be bright green because of iron deficiency, and that's strictly a variation in the genetics of that plant and ability to extract iron from the soil. And so I always like to go to my local garden store. I like to go to you know, South Country Greenhouse or Garden Mart or Sun Country up in Artesia, because they're going to have the roses that they know are successful here. And you don't always get that because our soils are not the best in the world. And just as a side note, you go down the rose garden in front of the courthouse. That's a memorial rose garden out there in front, and each one of those rose bushes is a memorial to somebody. And back when I first came here as a county agent 20 years ago, I was told that probably 80% of those roses are memorials to people who were on the Bataan Death March from Eddy County. And so we've managed to replace those as those roses die out and get old. All three greenhouses have volunteered to give me roses when I need that. And so we try to keep that 75 roses there at the number of 75. Okay, so we've let that soak long enough. I always like to look at my blade, make sure it's sharp, you know, and that's a good sharp blade. There's no nicks in it, and I like the one that ratchets. And so we're going to go over here, and we're going to look, and I'm going to look this rose bush over, and I see this little dead spot right here, so that branch is diseased, and we're going to take that one out. Just that simple, you know. And I look at this, and this branch grows into the plant, and I don't want that to happen. I want my branches to grow out because it gets too crowded in the middle and causes problems. So that's a pruning error last year from my master gardener, so we took that one out. Now we look at this and we think, okay, I'm going to switch off and put that, I put it back into my solution there, get out my small ones, and I start looking for buds. I'm going to take this off. I'm cutting out at 45. I'm going to take this off right here because I'm going to use this one as a branch. And I'm not finding, there's a bud in it. See, that bud's coming in the wrong way. And so I'm going to try, I like this one here, so I'm going to cut this one 45 right there. Okay, and I'm going to take this one out because I don't want it growing to the inside of the plant. I want it to grow out. I come over to this big branch, and again, there's a bud right there. If I go just a little bit above it, I'm going to force that bud, but if I force that bud, which way is it going to grow? It's going to grow into the plant, and I don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. There's a bud right there. I'm going to take that off, and now grow out this way. There's a bud right there that's already sprouted, and we want to come about 3/8 of an inch above, cut at a 45, and now make that grow up that way. And you know, I always kid people that if you look at our publications, we never show actual pictures of plants. We always use line diagrams. That's because plants don't grow the way they're supposed to. You know, and so we have to use line diagrams because we can't make them grow the way we want to prune them. And when you see that tearing like that, that tells me it's time to take this pair of shears apart and sharpen it. And you shouldn't have tearing with, especially with a bypass pruner like this. You shouldn't have any tearing at all. Now see, here's this bud right here. I want it to come out. I'm going to go a little bit above it, cut out a 45, and take that off. And this plant here, I don't want that one, so I'm going to take that out. I want this bud right here to grow out this way, so I'm going to go just right above it again, cut that out, and that's all we have to do to this one. You know, I might come in here and take a couple of these that are growing to the inside out, just because I don't want them to grow in like that. And that's pretty good. And that should give us, because we pruned it back pretty hard, that's going to give us a lot of small flowers, but there'll be a lot of flowers. And this is a pink flower on this one, and it smells really good. And so that's why we want lots of flowers, so we can get that odor to smell, come out and smell, and you've noticed that smell, fragrance when you walk into the building. So now let's go over to a little bit bigger plant. I'm going to lock my shears again. Think safety, keep your hands and lock it. I always recommend people wear gloves and pruning rose bushes. My hands are really calloused, but I can still get punctured really easy, and so I don't have my gloves with me today either. But wear gloves, think about what you're doing. If you're going to be working on a big plant, I tell people wear safety goggles, because that branch fall over and that thorn hits you in the face, that could puncture an eye or cause problems. So wear safety goggles on bigger plants. You look at this plant, you look down here at this crown, and you can tell that is a really old rose bush. That crown is almost 1.5 feet in diameter. That rose bush is probably 40 years old, you know, but we've kept it down this size. I got one over on the other side that we haven't pruned in 15 years, and you can actually get a rose tree it's going to be as tall as this building, and we're just kind of doing that for the demonstration of it. But this plant, and then this one over here is a climbing rose, and you look at it, look how big around this crown is down here. This crown is huge. And this rose is climbing rose, and a lot of people don't like it because it only flowers once a year. But this rose bush came from the original Eddy house. It was one of the old original Eddy roses. It's over 100 years old. It was planted, we had some planted at the library from the old Eddy house. I don't know where it originally came from. It's an old variety because it only flowers once a year. But we pruned it back really severe last year because we redid the outside of the building here, repainted it and redid all that. Before that, it went almost all the way to the roof. And but we pruned it back really severe, and it came back, and that also, you know, enabled the workers so they could work around it and whatnot. And this plant, this rose bush here, also came from the old Eddy house, and you can see I don't think it's as old as this one, just because it's a little bit more modern hybrid. But you can again see that rose bush is at least 60-70 years old. And so you can have rose bushes that last a long time. There's some rose bushes in England that are well over 300 years old and still producing nice flowers, and part of the garden there in England, in the English gardens. And Mr. Lutman could probably testify to you about that. So, okay, so let's go back. We're going to start on this one here, and I'm going to pull out the big ones because it's right here on the sidewalk, and if we don't prune this back, it's going to be all the way out over here and you can't walk down the sidewalk. So we're going to have to prune this back to keep it from getting in the sidewalk, and I'm going to be a little more severe than I was last year with it. You know, and because I didn't put my gloves on, and handle it that way. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to leave this one here. I'll lift this over, and this one's growing the wrong way. It's coming out of the crown. We're going to go all the way down the crown there and prune that one out just because it was in the wrong place. Okay. There's a couple people around town that are really better at this than I am. Mark Walderscheid is really good at his roses. There's a couple ladies in town. There's one master gardener in town, has 190 rose bushes in her backyard. They're absolutely beautiful. And talk about sweet smelling fragrance when you go into her backyard. That's it. Now, to prevent diseases, sometimes if you notice a disease on a plant, you need to stop and I'm going to do something I usually don't do. I'm going to prune this one off because it goes out into it is. I'm going to leave this one, even though it's growing inside. I pruned this one off because it was going into the sidewalk. So I'm leaving this one to the inside because I took the outside one off, and hopefully we'll get it to grow up a little bit. I'm going to take off. I'm going to get my smaller ones to do that. I'm going to prune this one off right there. That one off right there. Again, we got to make it so people can walk down the sidewalk and not be scratched up with roses. Take this one off all the way to the bottom. I just don't like where it's growing at. Don't like what it's doing. Take this one off here. That's a little bit lower than what I did last year, but if we look at this branch here, it's got some rose diseases in it. See this black dark? That's because it died, and then its dark is moving down this stem. So just to make sure, I'm pruning it pretty far back, and I'm also going to make sure I sanitize my blade before I go to my next cut so I don't spread that disease to the next cut. Okay, now this one, that branch is going to the inside. We're going to take it out. And about 45, cut that. Now, a lot of people want to know if they use pruning paint. We don't recommend using any pruning paint. I use a 10% Clorox solution or horticulture sanitary solution. In Eddy County, the pruning paints will get hot because most of them are dark, and they'll blister, and then you have a dark, moist, anaerobic situation where there's no oxygen, and that's what funguses and bacteria like to grow in. And so it causes more problems if we put pruning plane on than if we just let nature take its course. So making the right cut, using sharp shears, sanitizing between it is more important than using pruning paint. And so I try to stay away from pruning paint. I do use it for certain things, and I'm taking that one out because it goes to the middle. And one thing about roses, they're so prolific, if you make a mistake, you can fix it next year. Any branches that rub up against each other, any dead branches you want to take out, branches that are going to rub up and cause problems you want to take out. I'm going to take all these out. Look for diseases, look for things that just don't look normal. And I'm going to go to the smaller shears. I need to be sharpened, but like this one, this branch here is obviously dying or dead. We want to take that out. I'm going to come up here and take this branch because I'm trying to reduce the size of this tree, this plant. Now see, this one we broke and we damaged it, so we want to look, and there's a bud right there, so I'm going to cut that off right there. Okay. You just work through your plant. This one's growing the wrong direction. We got another diseased one right there. And if you prune right and take care of them, you ought to be able to get long life out of these rose bushes. But and if Mark, if you're watching, you see me do something wrong, don't tell anybody. Because the plant will survive even an amateur pruning it. So don't worry about how you prune it. The main thing is get in there and get it done. Get it opened up so you can control diseases. Now see this one here, this one's starting to die down here. We already pruned a bunch of it off, so we're going to go down a little bit deeper than that. Boy, those shears are I didn't realize how dull they were. I used them this weekend and on my wife's roses. I give my wife a rose bush every year for her birthday. That way she doesn't, it's cheaper than buying dozens of roses every year. And it's a gift that keeps on giving. And that's kind of and like I said, this in Eddy County, there's no really good time to prune roses. It's either too late or too early, just any time you really want to prune roses. So the main thing is just get out there and do it. Kind of like the Nike commercial, get it done. If you come back in a couple days and you don't like what it is, pull out your pruning shears, sanitize them again, and go back there and prune it. It's like I just got done. I said, I really don't like the fact I left that big old stump there. I'm going to come and cut that off. Open that up a little bit more, but I'm going to cut this off. But that's kind of a, you can prune it back a lot more severe like we did this little one, but we, like I said, on this plant here, we want big, pretty flowers and not a whole lot of them, so we don't prune it back as severe. And this one will have great big old white flowers. And as you can see here, we're already showing some deficiency of nitrogen. It's time to fertilize these plants a little bit. That yellow, when you get the whole leaf turning yellow on your new growth like this and the old growth looks good, That's nitrogen deficiency. So this one needs a little bit of ammonium sulfate, probably about a pound, pound and a half. Without a soil sample, I'm just kind of guessing, but it needs a little bit of ammonium sulfate. And with roses, I always throw in some iron. And don't, probably some of the stores around town might get mad at me for saying this, but don't buy ironite. Ironite is a great product when you have a pH of 7.2 or less. It does not work in our high pH soils. It will last for 3 days and then it's gone. It's tied up with this calcium carbonate in our soil. So try to stay away from ironite. The next best product out there is Sequestration 138, and it's a product, and it works real good in pH soils that have a pH of 7.3 to 7.4, 7.5, even up in the 7.6 realm. And I got a nice slide that I'll show one of these times we talk about fertility. And some research we did about availability of iron in soils. The best product for our soils, and because it never loses the amount of available iron for the plant, no matter what the pH is, from all the way from 6.2 all the way up, which is acid, which we don't see here, all the way up to 8.2, 8.3, which is the worst soils I see here, is Miller's Ferri Plus. It's a chelated iron, and whatever you put out there, it's all available. It costs you more, but per pound of nutrient that's used by the plant, it's the cheapest product out there. You know, it costs you more initially, but you'll get more results out of it. It will last for 21 days. It'll be available for plants for well over 21 days, whereas Sequestration will only be available for about 14 days, and ironite's only available for about 3 days. Iron filings dumped in the soil, there's no scientific proof that it works. But my grandfather, whenever we planted a tree or a rose bush, we always threw an old horseshoe in for good luck. So, I don't know if it works or not, but it always brought our plants good luck. So throw an old horseshoe in there before you plant them. They'll be there in 40 years when you dig it up. As you can see from this one little rose bush, we've got quite a few stems out here and canes that we've pruned off. Always never compost your rose canes. I just don't think that's a good idea here. Always take them and put them in a dumpster, get them hauled off to the county dump, because roses have so many different cane diseases that can be harbored in that cane, and it's just a good idea, good sanitation, get them away from your desirable roses and let them go someplace where it won't hurt anything. So that's Woods Houghton with the Eddy County Extension Office. Go out and prune your roses while you still have time, and like I said, you can prune all the way through the summer as you need to. Have a good day. Have a good spring.